stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have community announcements. Doug?
Thanks, Tiffany. So a reminder, we'll be doing this again for all the meetings between now and the spring, that the board has voted to put the fire station building project, the revised Plan B, before voters in the form of a debt exclusion at the annual election on April 12th and the annual town meeting on May 5th. There will be a lot more outreach to come in the future between now and then. And then secondly, we talked about this a while ago regarding the EV stations owned and maintained by National Grid. And just to follow up, and in particular, as John had requested, National Grid has identified that they will be removing the public EV charging station, which is an electric vehicle charging station at the public library. I don't have an exact date, but it will be in the near future. So we have put signs up on the physical unit, put it up on the bulletin board, put it up on social media, et cetera. So, and it will obviously show up appropriately on the various apps for those that have electric vehicles and search for charging stations. And we've been redirecting people to the new charging stations that the town has installed at the Phelps Elementary School. It's at the parking lot for the turf field at Phelps. And that's all I have for announcements.
Thank you. Next, we have minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 21st, 2025?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I abstain.
Okay.
Tiffany, can I go back to one thing before
Please.
you go on? I forgot to mention something funny regarding the electric vehicle charging stations, if you saw this in the packet. So I got a copy from the library director of the sign that she posted on the charging station, which was helpful. And then this I thought was pretty funny, and this is not a joke, this is real. So it was a note that someone left on a regular gasoline-powered car that was inappropriately parked at the electric vehicle charging station spot. And the note says, "This is not an electric car, yet you have taken up one of the few charging stations. If you are unable to read simple parking instructions, you probably should not be at the library anyways." So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, and then he spells unable wrong.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Anyways, that's-
Next, we have new business. And we have Liza Landy, vote to specific dates for in-person early voting, April 2025 annual town election. Hello, Liza.
Hi, my friends. So I spoke with Doug about the annual town election, how we voted to have early voting in person. And what I neglected to do was, when you heard and voted on the motion, we were supposed to vote on hours at that time. The board was to vote on hours. So I contacted town council, and I hope it's in your packet as to what the parameters of the dates are. So I propose that we do Wednesday to Wednesday, including Saturday hours, no Sunday hours, prior to, I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I can't tell you, 12, 10, ending on the 10th.
April 2nd to April 9th.
Right, yes, thank you. And also that will not affect this room, like, because the early voting takes place in here, so it won't affect your meetings.
Okay.
So I was sorry I didn't ask you to vote on the days and times, but that's what I propose. I think it'll work for the public, and it is within the parameters of Mass General law.
Okay.
So it's normal town hall hours and Saturday 9 to 3?
Yes,
For those
yep.
dates, okay.
Yep. During early voting for the state, it was a minimum of 6 hours on Saturday, so I just adopted that same 6 hours.
Okay.
Okay, so you would like, may I have a motion to approve the in-person early voting starting on April 2nd, ending on April 9th, Saturday 9 to 3, no Sunday hours, normal town hall hours, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Make a motion.
Do I, second?
Yeah, second.
All those in
Awesome.
favor? And that is unanimous. Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Liza. Okay. Next, we have the building department recommended fee increase, and we have the building committee. Tom, can you please come up?
And while Tom's coming up, there's two things in your packet. It should be, I think, after the letter B. Most of it are pages where, and Tom will explain all this, where he did a search for other communities, what their fees are, and you can see certain things highlighted in different colors, especially what's recommended in yellow. Tom will go through all those. But then he'll also highlight the last page in this section, gives two examples of two hypothetical projects and what the differences in revenue would be based on his fees. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. I want to thank the board, for it's been a while since I've been to the board, and I want to thank, before I start, I want to thank Joe Dunlop that did this research for me. It's been since 2013 since I've checked these figures out, and after going to seminars, I'm finding out that a lot of local towns are not using the square foot no more. They're using the value of the project, which is the total cost of whatever the project is, instead of square footage. We've been using square footage. If you look at the paperwork that you have in front of you, just look at the bottom three columns, the averages, Rockland, and recommended. Those are the ones you should be looking at. And the two that are large are the page 1 on the bottom and page 2 are the two big differences. The other ones are only about $1, maybe $2 off. But the one on the bottom, let's start with the average. As you can see, it's 50 cents a square foot. And if you do the project that Doug had mentioned, you'll look and you're going to find that that particular job was $350,000. It was a single-family home. And if we based it on 50 cents a square foot, that permit came to $901. Are you guys following that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you use the average of the $30 for the first 1,000, and then you based on that 350,000, you're going to come up with quite a bit of a difference. Okay, and that's taken it. All of this is based on 4 different towns. You got Abington, Whitman, Hanson, and Holbrook. You can see that based on that, the 1803 square foot times the 50 cents a square foot, we're only charging $900. And if you go with the square footage, that's what you end up with. But if you go with the 350,000 at so much per 1,000, you come up with a big difference. You following that?
Yep.
Okay. That's the biggest one. The commercial one on page 2 isn't as bad. But you have the same thing. We were using $70 cents a square foot for new construction, and we're using 60 cents a square foot for additions. I don't want to use a square foot no more. I'd rather use what everybody else is using, have been using the last couple of years, based on the value of the project. So if you take that 1838, and if you go by the 70 or the 60 square foot, you find out that, you're looking at 21,000 or 24,000 versus 27,000. So that's not as bad as the residential. I know it's a lot. I mean, you can look at these charts and get back to me, but the rest of them is pretty much explained themselves. There's a lot there.
And Tom, just to be clear, what you're looking for, if they decide to vote something tonight, would be where it's recommended and highlighted in yellow, right? That's what you're looking for them to approve?
Well, I don't have what you got highlighted in yellow.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry. All right, I'll show you. So like the recommended line.
Right,
Right, that's what you want them to vote.
Right.
The recommended line.
right.
I have a question. I'm looking at these examples, and, like this one jumps from $901.50 for the residential rate to $5,265 for a residential rate. Is there a way that it wouldn't hurt so bad
Yes.
Right now, I mean, can we like do a slow roll over a few years into
Right.
this?
If you look at the towns, the abutting towns, I was using the 15. Instead of using the 15, we can use the 12.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's quite a big
Well,
jump.
but
So
something,
going, switching
yeah, I hear you.
systems,
I hear you. I mean, we can use the 12, but it's something to think about. It's, instead of using the square footage, we're way off. And I've had contractors tell me
Yeah,
that, Rockland is, our fees are off. It's pretty bad when a contractor tells us that.
yeah.
So we can do whatever we want. It's just that, I was looking at 15, 30, 30, and 55. I figured I'd go with the 15. But if you want to go with the 12, we can go with the 12. It's up to you,
Well,
guys.
I mean, sometimes having such a big jump for residents is
Well,
it's
let me,
kind of a
let me say
shocking
this
thing.
also. This is new construction.
yeah.
We'll probably have 3 or 4 houses a year.
Well, does this include ADUs, like the new law that went in?
The ADUs, well, yeah, it would be
for
based on,
additions and
yeah.
stuff? Yeah,
It'd
there
be
might
based
be
on
more
new
than,
yeah.
more than 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah.
So,
But obviously, the tiny homes and the ADUs are not going to be as big as a $350,000 home.
true. Okay,
And we get 3 or 4 a year, and that's it.
all right.
It's up to you guys.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, so in this example, 349,000, that's just on the structure, right? When we figure what cost to base on it, it's the cost to
building,
build the
The
building.
dwelling, yeah.
Okay, just making sure, okay.
And I'm only using that as an exclusive example because that came up as one of the new homes.
And then should we vote this forward tonight? Would that effect take immediate, take it?
I'd be talking to council on that.
Okay.
So these additional fees, just for the public to know, what do you use them for? Like,
That goes in the general fund.
Yeah, these come in as a local receipt.
Okay.
So this is what helps
yep,
fund the budget. And, I appreciate what Tom did and his staff looking at this. This is one of the things that the Finance Committee's asked us to look at, asked all the departments, not only what's your budget, how much you're asking to spend, but what, if any, role do you have in bringing in revenue, and have you looked
Oh,
at
gotcha.
fees, and are you
Okay.
looking at ways to bring in additional revenue to the town, that type of thing, so.
all right.
Okay.
And you can, if you want to look at the whole book, there's a lot here.
Yeah.
But those 2 were the worst, the new constructions. Those are based on the square footage. Everything else is pretty much there.
Yeah.
They're not much at all.
Yeah, I saw that on the.
Can I say one other thing, Tiffany? Just getting
Yes.
back to Lori's point about how it will be a big jump if you approve these, but that's mainly because our current fees are so low and out of whack. You could also, instead of doing what Tom suggested at, say, $12 in that example, you could vote all his recommendations, but you could look to phase them in, which is what I think you
Right.
were getting at. So you could do like 25% of the increase in year 1, 50, 75 in year 3, and within 4 years we get here. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I'm just throwing that out as an option if you'd rather phase it in rather than just flicking the switch and going right to it.
Because it seems that even phasing in would be proportionally a lot more than you're getting now because of the fact that we're so, the fees right now are so dated.
Right. And as we fade in, all these other towns are going to be going up too as we go. So, I mean, when we're going to do for catch-up? Who knows? And I know the economy and everything, everybody's hurt, and I understand that, but where this is so far off, I wish you'd give it some thought, that's all.
Okay. I would like all of us to give this consideration, and perhaps we can revisit about next meeting.
Okay.
Unless we have,
Yeah.
we can have that open for discussion as well.
It can wait. I'm
Yeah.
thinking we just pull the trigger and do it. That would be my preference, that it's been 10 years plus since we've looked at these. Yeah, I mean, given it's only 3 or 4 houses, I mean, if you're building a house, an extra couple $1,000s is, kind of a drop in the bucket, so I don't see why we couldn't just do it now, but if you all want to wait, I'm cool with that too. So.
In terms of the 12 or 15, do you have an opinion on that?
If I were to make a motion that we approve what Tom has recommended, his recommendations, as he's recommended them, so.
Okay.
But
Select Board Member O'Laughlin, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my brain around it a little bit. I agree with John, but I also think it might be an idea to kind of take a little bit of time and just kind of review it. And I'm going through some of these individual permit fees, and some of them do increase significantly. And I think one of the things that we notice is, you know, everybody seems to be overtaxed these days, you know, across the board, you know, and I think if we can avoid increasing tax on residents, you know, as is, that, you know, existing residents, then I'd be in favor of that, kind of looking at those fees. I mean, swimming pools jumping from $50, above ground swimming pools jumping from $50 to $70 for a permit. And it's $20, but it's $20, and I think there's already a lot of, you know, people feeling, you know, tightened purse strings these days as it is. So, you know, reviewing some of that. But as far as the new construction, you know, I don't have a real concern about that, because to John's point, if they're building a new construction, it's a couple $1,000s more, you know, on what they're already putting into it, and most of the time that's the developer that's doing that anyway, pulling the permit. So,
Okay.
so I mean, I wouldn't be against approving the second page that we see, the fees, the commercial rates, new additions, and the residential rates. But as far as like the electric permit fees and yeah, the plumbing fees, I think we'd want to take a look at that a little bit, just to make sure that we're not really pricing out some of the residents in town, you know, they want to get things done in their homes.
okay, yeah, that sounds.
So with that said, do I have a motion on the second page, new construction as recommended by,
I'll make a motion.
and do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Okay.
Okay, so what, we're gonna go,
Yeah, so, and Tom, I think the thing, I mean, obviously, I trust the work that you guys have done on this. You know, you've been in your position for a long time. I got a ton of respect for the work that you've done. I think I just want to kind of take a look at it, and if there's, you know, some questions or whatever, that maybe I'll reach back out, just, you know, a thought that maybe you come down a little bit on this one. I think I saw one that jumped up to $200 that was $50, and, you know, if the average of the communities that you went to, if it's over the average, you know, I don't know that we should be the leader in the clubhouse as far as being the most expensive on a permit, on any specific permit, based on what residents are already being taxed. Just my thought. But, I mean, I think by next meeting, you know, we'll have a better idea of this and go from there.
okay.
Can I just clarify which ones you did approve just now?
We approved the commercial rates, new additions, and the residential rates, new construction.
The second page.
Yeah, that one.
The last
That
page.
The last page.
Last page,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, gotcha. So Tom, you got that?
Yeah.
That's the last one. All right. Great, so we'll put it on the agenda for the next one too, and you can
Right.
decide what you want to do on the rest. Okay.
You want to mention anything about what happened today?
The preambulation, yeah, I was gonna, can you stick around? We'll get to that
Yeah.
in like a minute.
All right.
What's up, actually, it's up to you, Tiffany. I was gonna mention this in other business not reasonably anticipated, but
Yep.
it does relate to Tom. Can we take that out of order then?
While you're here,
While
I
Tom's
think
here?
that would
All
be
right.
helpful.
So let me do this if I can,
Thank you.
if I can kick it off. So I did send, you guys got an email from Kevin Donovan, the Abington Select Board Chair. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I have a copy of that plus something else, and then I'll explain what it is.
Thank you.
So it's one of the things I like about this job. I always learn something new every day. So we got this email from the town administrator, and it's not the town administrator, the chair of the select board in Abington, talking about how the Abington Select Board will be preambulating the bounds of the town of Abington. So I have to admit, I had to look that word up. I wasn't familiar with it. So it has to do with like physically walking, you know, the boundaries of the town and looking for the proper markers and having all that set. So he sent you all that note to see if any of you wanted to join them, and he's referencing a Mass General Law. That's what I printed out there behind you as well. So I forwarded this to a couple of relevant staff that I thought might know something about this, because this was new to me. So that's why Tom brought this up, because it turns out Tom is the one that did this with Rob Rosa, our zoning board chair, who's also a land surveyor, 10-plus years ago. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to talk about it a little bit, but I think where we're going with this is, if you guys want to join them, you certainly can, but I'd recommend either in addition to or instead of that, delegating that work to Tom and Rob Rosa, who's a surveyor, because I think they know what they're doing, they've done it before, but maybe Tom,
Yeah,
do you want to?
I don't believe that Kevin had mentioned that, other than he wanted the select board to be there, but Mass General Law states that you can appoint 2 other people, and if you want to appoint me and Rob, I already talked to Rob, he's on board, and he's a registered land surveyor anyway, so he has that $8,000 worth of gear that makes him look like a Martian, and we go through the woods and we find the markers, so, but we need you guys to appoint us.
Okay.
Okay.
With that, may I have a motion to appoint Tom Ripple and Rob Rosa as our representatives, and then should any, well, may I have that motion?
Motion.
May I have a second? All those in favor? Okay.
That's it.
And then should anybody want to join you, we have the invitation right here in the details.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Okay,
Tom, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have Highway Superintendent Dave Taylor with snow and ice stipend. Come on up, Dave. Dave, how are you?
Good. You want to do your
I'll-
preamble, or?
Sure, I'll do my preamble after my perambulation discussion. We've done this, every year for the past few years. Giving Dave a stipend to do snow and ice plowing actually saves the taxpayers money, because he can do the work at a lower cost than what we'd have to pay a private contractor otherwise. So I would recommend we continue the past practice. There's just a hourly amount with a not to exceed. So if he doesn't go out, he doesn't get paid. It's not like a guaranteed thing. It's just hours worked up to a cap.
And those are off hours. So I do keep up with my hydraulic license every 2 years, so I am qualified to drive every piece of machinery that we own down at the highway, so. And then we're obviously short, like every other town, as far as contractors. My route happens to be from Biggins Funeral Home up to Holy Family. I do the town hall, and I also do in front of the high school, so that's usually my route in the loader, so. That's pretty much it.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I know last year when we talked about this, I floated the idea of maybe putting this on into the budget, list it as something that we put on in front of the voters at town meeting. As an elected official, your compensation is supposed to be set at town meeting, and this is kind of like, I get it, it's kind of a weird exception, but I would feel better if we could find a way to list it on the warrant that gets voted at town meeting, rather than continuing to do it this way. I think I let it go last year. I'm going to make that same suggestion, that we begin to find a way to list it. I know that if you list it, there's a chance that all 10,000 will get paid to them, but I trust that the process would still work the same, whether it was listed on a line item in your budget. You would still turn back any excess, just like you do with anything else on your budget. So I don't have any fears about, if we list it on there, and then if the voters say, why are we paying, the highway superintendent to do work when he's already elected to kind of do that work? I know that isn't quite accurate, but it's really their call and not ours, so.
Yeah.
I mentioned that last year, yeah.
The only
So-
big thing would still have to come out of I don't know how you would do that because it's listed under the snow budget.
Yeah, so that we talked about this before, and so my concern was that'll actually increase cost to our budget, because we pay for this out of snow and ice. So if we
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so if we put it in the general fund budget, then we're increasing our budget. And again, the way we normally do it is, if he doesn't have to go out, he doesn't go out, he doesn't get paid.
Right.
So we did I did my very best to call out other types of stipends, because that was a concern you raised last time, that it wasn't just Dave, it was kind of anybody that should be transparent, and we did that with other staff that get parts of their salary offset from revolving funds. But I don't really know how to do what you're asking without increasing cost to the budget, which I didn't think would make sense.
Well, it would increase it for 1 year, and then because we'd spend in hypothetically 10,000 less out of snow and ice, that means we'd hit 10,000, we'd be kind of borrowing 10,000 less against next year, so then it wouldn't eventually even out. We'd have to put 10,000 more in.
Right, so this
budget.
year I'd have to add $10,000 to the
Right,
budget.
but then it kind of washes, because we'll,
Right.
in theory, not have to deficit spend 10,000 of snow and ice, right?
Yeah, it's just that I would have to increase our budget by
Yes.
$10,000 this
Yeah,
year,
I get it.
which I wasn't looking to do, but.
No, I get it.
If that's what you want to do, we can, as a board, we can absolutely do that. I think the other question to raise would be the other types of ways that we do offsets with other funding sources are for guaranteed amounts, stipends or just portions of salary. So, because again, the way it is now, he only gets paid for hours actually worked. But I imagine if you put it in the budget, that would be a guarantee that he might get paid for more hours than he would otherwise have gotten paid if he'd only gotten paid for hours worked. So if you're okay with that, we can do that too.
Well, I don't think that would necessarily happen, but, I'm
Yeah.
expecting to get outvoted, so it's not.
I'm not sure.
We don't want to waste a lot of time on it.
I mean, John, you make a good point, but I also think it's one, to Doug's point, we've already voted the money in the snow and ice budget at town meeting as part of the snow and ice budget, and he's just taking it from the snow and ice budget. But
Okay.
I think, I think we talked about this last year too. The residents, they voted for us to make these decisions. And I think this is us making the decision that the residents put us here to make, instead of putting it in front of them. We've seen it happen in the past. I mean, what happens if they turn down the stipend for Dave? Then now we don't have somebody going out to clear the street.
We have to pay a vendor to do it a lot more.
And we'd end up
And
paying
we'd end up
more
paying a lot
money.
more, so.
That would be something you'd explain at town meeting.
But that's something that we've seen town meeting where, sometimes it becomes a popularity contest. Unfortunately for Dave right now, people seem to like him, but that could change at some point, and they could say, we're gonna take this away from Dave Taylor. We've seen it happen with other departments in the past. So I think from a standpoint of, one, it was a deal that was negotiated by the Board of Selectmen, along with Dave, several years back, and I think we stand by the deal that we made. And I think, to your point, the people if they have a real problem with this, then they don't have to vote for the people that made the decision the next time that any of us are on the ballot. I think it's our decision to make at this
No,
point. Because it's in the budget, we're just authorizing him to spend from the snow and ice budget any additional hours that he puts in above and beyond his full workday at a discounted rate to clear the streets and keep the town residents safe. I think it's a no-brainer for us.
And I do appreciate your voicing, your idea and whatnot again. But I also want to applaud Dave because our roads have been spectacular throughout this. You drive around on a snowstorm, during a snowstorm, and you can tell the difference. And that's something that I feel like we're very fortunate to have you overseeing this as well. So I want to say thank you to that as well.
Yeah, and just so I'm clear, I don't think you shouldn't get paid it. I just don't think it's our decision.
No, I
I just,
understand that.
okay, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
you're clear about that.
Well, keep
As
in
an
mind-
elected official, I just keep
Yeah.
knowing that it's what the voters are supposed to set your compensation, and I would feel a lot better if they explicitly said that they're cool with this, rather than us continuing to do it. So that's, again, you do a great job. I don't have a problem with paying you extra to do these extra things. It's just I'd rather cast a vote at town meeting rather than from up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna come a time when I'm not gonna wanna do it. So, I'm not gonna wanna go out at 1 or 2 in the morning and drive a loader around. I'm just not at that point yet.
Yeah.
The other thing is too, I've never come remotely close to that peak of that $10,000 that you guys use as a threshold. That, even, we've had a couple blizzards and we haven't come close to that. So, keep in mind, I don't go out with every single one. Do you know what so there are some where my guys go out, we have capable foremen and capable crews. If it's a small event, they can handle it themselves, and I don't go out. I'll do everything from the office, so. But we have very good crews, and, I'm thankful for that, because we have good crew leaders and everybody from office staff out to our subcontractors, to our crew leaders, so it's on them, so if they didn't care, it wouldn't look that good, so,
Yeah, the crew is stellar.
yeah.
It really is. We're
They are.
very lucky, very lucky.
We are very fortunate compared to other towns, and we're very fortunate, like I said, the crew leaders, all the staff, and then we have very good contractors, and we have a lot of new people, so, and that drops down onto those new people too, so. If residents have a little patience, any little inconsistencies that we've had this year, they'll get better each time, so, yeah.
Great. So with that said, Doug, just curious, should I read out the parameters even though they're the same that we have had? So we could have a motion to
Sure.
initiate, the same conditions that we've had, or I can also have a motion and then just read the bullets under the payment shall be subject to the conditions listed below?
Yeah, I think if you just said the same, the same conditions as before, the cap not to exceed $10,000, $50 an hour, I think that's sufficient.
All right, so may I have the motion to establish the same conditions that we have had, the cap not to exceed $10,000 and at the hourly rate of $50 per hour.
Motion?
May I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
I'm a no.
Okay, and that's three. And
I don't know if there was any other questions on any other items while I'm
Yeah,
here,
why don't we have you
so.
up here? If you could give us a little bit of a update on the highway
Highway.
sewer.
Well, the sewers will take a little longer, but highway, well, we're obviously into the winter season, which is great for us, because we're not handling 100 things at a time. It's usually snow, some tree work. We started on the park, the mini park across the street over where the old Dunkin' Donuts was. So we started that, and then the weather came. So as soon as the weather clears out, we'll be back over there. Started the hardscape. We've started sorting out the piles up at the recycle center as far as getting rid of all the debris up there, so that's another project that we have going on during the winter. I'm trying to think what else. We signed the paperwork on the Complete Streets grant that we hit. We did get turned down on a Shared Streets grant, but we'll try to reapply for that next year. It was in the school zone, so I think we've kind of at that threshold with the state that we've hit on so many grants right now. And then with the Mass Works and the TIP project, we'll probably be stagnant for a little while, and we'll just keep applying for smaller grants. We just applied for a tree arborist grant, so it's a small grant to replace trees. So we do have that policy. I don't know if I've ever gone over it before, but whenever there's a development or a road construction project and we have to remove trees, the town replaces those trees 2-to-1 back. So if we have to take a street tree down, do next door like a sidewalk project, we'll replace those with 2 trees. And we let the homeowner, they get first dibs, and if not, then we reach out to the next homeowner in that project scope. So we're not just cutting the tree down and not replacing it. Developers are held liable to a 3-1 ratio. So we just had the project on Dyer Street. He took down 3 trees, but has to replace 9 trees. So we'll offer the first for the homeowners that abut the property and the scope of the property, and if not, then we'll use them at different projects throughout town. So trying to think if there's anything else. We're about to put out bids for the road construction coming up. So we have our pavement bid that's coming up this year that'll have to be bid out. And then we also do an equipment rental bid, which is a little different. We kind of designed 6 years ago where we can rent out any piece of equipment, saves the town an enormous amount of money. So both those bids will be going out for the spring. And then end of February, release our roadwork projects for the upcoming year. So on what we have scoped out for the year. We do have North Ave, that'll be started this year. That's the curb and walk project, so that'll be started, probably guessing July, maybe August. We have 3 projects, 3 curb and walk projects coming up on Belmont, Pacific, and Reed. Those are all coming off of Union Street. So those will be significant because they're coming off of the main corridor of Union Street and will provide connectivity into the school zone. And those were voted on last year by the residents of town article. So we actually just took the receivership of the curbing. So we buy all the curbing during the winter months. So we save about $3 or $4 a linear foot if we buy it this time of year and we just stock it up. So those are significant projects, and then the road projects will be more or less designated over on the side streets off of Pond Street this year. We've already done a ton of drainage work over there, and I think we recouped a lot. So that's pretty much it on the highway. As far as sewer, we're getting caught up on probably 2 years of backlog over there on some just day-to-day operations. They're finishing up the digester boiler project, gas piping. We're about to finish up the generator project over there. There's going to be an overrun on that project. I'm trying to think. That'll be done within the next couple of weeks, and we've been working with Wright Pierce on the preliminary design of the project, and there's an OPM bid that just went out. I think those are all coming in by, February 12th?
Right.
Yeah, February 12th, so that's the owner, property manager, so they'll, project manager, sorry. That'll oversee the whole project and, help us deal with the contractors and the design. We did tell Wright Pierce to kind of scope it back a little bit until we get the OPM on board, just so we're a little bit more comfortable moving forward. So we'll keep it in preliminary design right now. We're working with Weston and Sampson on I&I program coming up this year, so we're a little behind on the rehabilitation of some of the I&I that's been identified over the last few years, and we've committed just a little under $1 million this year going after I&I rehabilitation, so they'll be coming up with a project list for us so we can move forward on that. So that bid, we expect to go out for that work end of March, early April, so we can get on that. So good things happening. So any questions on anything or projects? What do you got?
Yeah, the complete streets for North Ave. I noticed there's a wall there with a culvert in it. That's an old stone wall that's caving in. I mean,
Yeah.
Is that part of the project? or-
That'll probably be depending on what we usually do is once we get a grant like this, that'll coincide with some of our drainage funding.
Oh, okay.
Because that's the drainage funding that we have designated for that. And then also, we'll look at that. It is on the list of head walls to look at.
Okay.
It's probably like 8 or 9 on the priority list because we're dealing with,
Yeah.
we've got 2 head walls. Well, now that you bring it up, we've had 1 head wall on East Water Street that we're dealing with, and that's coming from the swamp pond that's right across the street. That is a huge outlet there, and it's been washing out. So that's a big project coming up this year. That's 2 6-foot pipes coming under that road, and they're old metal, corrugated metal pipes, so they all rot out on the bottom. So that is obviously an issue. That was one of the culverts we put in, and then Spruce Street 1 and 2, east and west, those ones. So that will be submitted this year, at the end of this year for that culvert. So, and then we're dealing with a lot of open drainage issues, which, most of the time it's usually owner error where they're, blowing the leaves or dumping grass or pushing brush out into open drainage and things get clogged up. So
Yeah.
that's a big issue right now throughout town because it's making the water go to an open space and it's causing flooding everywhere. So we do have that issue. We're going to try to get on that a little bit more proactively moving forward this year. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working for a time with the Parks Department on getting public, information out about that. So,
yeah, you have that on the rail trail. It's been an
Yeah,
issue
big
for a
time.
while too.
yep,
Yeah, people pumping out.
yep.
Yep.
All right, any more questions, comments? Thank you very much for the updates.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next we have managed new growth discussion. Select Board Vice Chair Lori Childs, you're going to lead the way. And then I know that we have our Assistant Town Administrator and Town Planner who are also going to join us.
And Tiffany, do you mind if I kick it off? So Lori asked about having a discussion of new growth on the agenda. So I thought I would just very briefly, talk about it from my perspective, and Allison and Courtney can talk about it from theirs. And we also have our Director of Assessing, Meg Peterson, and she's the one that actually calculates the official new growth number. But we all talk about it, generally. The one piece of information I put in your packet was a very short, I guess we'll call it a white paper that an official from the Department of Revenue put online that just gives an overview of what new growth is with a lot of good references and examples of charts and things. So just real big picture from my perspective, and Laura, you can take this conversation in whichever direction you want to. We're allowed under state law to increase our levy limit, the amount of money that we're able to raise through taxation, by 2.5% a year. So we're automatically allowed to go up by 2.5%. We also have additional surcharges like the Community Preservation Act, things like that. But the year-to-year increase is limited by 2.5%, except for debt exclusions or overrides. The only other change that can happen sort of automatically in addition to 2.5% is what's considered new growth, and that's generally considered construction. Could be an addition, could be new construction, but it's basically something new that's created. Probably technically, if a lot is subdivided, there could be new growth implications there. But for all intents and purposes, just think about it as like new construction. And so the benefit of that is if you don't have growth, the economy stagnates, jobs stagnates. You don't have you don't get enough housing, but the most important thing from a financial perspective is it increases our pie, so to speak, the pie of available funding. So it's an important tool that every city and town has some kind of appropriately managed new growth, because you don't want things to be uncontrolled where there's just sprawl and deteriorating quality of life and things like that. But in my opinion, from a financial perspective, we need to be open for whether it's residential development or commercial development to be able to increase that pie, because if you don't expand that tax base, that entire burden just keeps falling on the same property tax owners that are currently in town. So it's always good to try to grow the base and expand it. That's just my kind of simple introduction. I do have an overhead that Allison has. I don't know, Lori, if you want to ask any questions or if you want these guys to chime in, whichever way you want to take the discussion.
Thank you, first of all, Tiffany, for putting this on the agenda, because I felt it was, for a few years now, a really important discussion to have people understand why managed new growth, managed is the key word here, is important. Because often I hear that we don't want urban sprawl, we don't want to become Weymouth in Rockland, so if you can, explain how that can't happen here. And we're being priced out of our homes in Rockland, right? So, and the pricing out is kind of a result of not having managed new growth. So if you can do like a really simple explanation how it can benefit all of us, people think of the sprawl. I think of really cool stuff that's not in other towns. Like every time I drive by, down 123 to Stop and Shop or Target, I see that old bar that burnt out, that Tassinari property that, what was it called, Playtime? Or yeah.
Game time.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Right. It was the old 1, 2, 3. And I think to myself, that would make, and it would be on Rockland property, that would be a great pickleball facility, 2-story, with a restaurant up top, indoor, outdoor courts, and I think that would be phenomenal because, it's right on the Abington line, there's an Abington Pickleball League, it's huge in Duxbury, they would come out, and it would kind of get our economy going. People could go to other stores and restaurants and stuff in town. The thing that that is kind of a wrench in that whole plan is the noise from pickleball, but now they have developed rackets that tamp down the noise as well as fences and other things. So, I don't know, just cool stuff like that. And if you see new growth in towns that do it well, like Burlington, Vermont is my prime example, you know, it's a beautiful, old, quaint New England town. And you can't even tell that there's new growth, because the new growth is designed to meld in with the old look of the town. And, you know, we could certainly have bylaws in Rockland that, you know, that kind of mirror that. So, and another thing on top of that, and then I'll throw it to you guys, sorry about this. The old Burger King, I mean, before you were on, Allison, I was taking, you know, the specs and stuff for the Burger King to like Wahlburgers. I think it would be great to have a Wahlburgers drive-through. I don't even think they have a drive-through now. And, you know, I've contacted them several times, and they never got back with me, and I know somebody that knows the family, and they're like, oh, they're not going to develop in Rockland. Rockland's such a loser town. And I don't think that, of course, and I was like, are you kidding? It's a 123 corridor from Brockton to Situate, and it's a, you know, never heard from them. So I'd like to, you know, if that actually is a thing, I'd like to get that kind of attitude changed about the town as well. So, anyway, take it from here.
Trying to figure out where to start with that.
Yeah, I
a
think
little
we should
bit.
unpack that a
Yeah,
little bit.
let's unpack it a little bit,
So
yeah.
you know, if I can just, I think managed growth from like a town perspective
Yeah.
is layered, and as Doug, you know, correctly responded, you know, there's this like idea of the financial piece that allows the town to move forward without continuing to burden the same residents, right? You know, you want to be able to have town services. You know, you're not going to say like, okay, like we have to cut, you know, police. You guys can't respond to anything between like 2 and 5 o'clock. That's ridiculous, right? We have to keep the town moving, and it has to be paid for. And to your point, you know, and to Doug's point, development is part of that equation. And I think lots of times people look at the idea of development and growth as being the same thing, and, you know, just housing and commercial density, and that's not really it. You can, you know, you can put in zoning that is kind of coming from, you know, the principles of community-based planning, and you can also want to invest in parks and open space. You can have all these things that shouldn't be competing happening at the same time, and it can be, I think Rockland has lots of, you know, opportunity. There's lots of potential for things to happen in Rockland, and a good chunk of what is here already is great. I think we have to really, if we want to talk about the opportunity to grow in an area that's kind of built out, we're talking about redevelopment, and we really can't get there until we deal with our infrastructure challenges. And I think that is the biggest piece of this underlying managed growth conversation. Do you want to chime in a little bit?
Sure. Maybe I'll just build on what you're saying around like mechanics of what new growth looks like, and that is, you know, there is this way of talking about growth and development synonymously, where I think we have to be a little bit more nuanced when we're talking about it, because development can feel very overwhelming for some residents, and I think we have to talk about what can new growth look like, or what can redevelopment look like. And we need to have a bigger conversation about kind of revisioning some of the kind of key corridors like you're talking about. But we cannot really have that conversation in a real way until we talk about some of the mechanics of implementing that growth. And so I think that sometimes we kind of can gloss over those mechanics, and that really can be detrimental in some ways. So for instance, with infrastructure, and this is not unique to Rockland, it's, you know, it's a South Shore thing generally, you know, there is a limited capacity when it comes to infrastructure in the region. And so I think when we're talking about growth, we have to talk about it in a more holistic way. So we have to talk about it in a way in which we are kind of cross-collaborating on this big thing called growth in the community, which will generate new revenue, but also will generate change in a community. And that can be new construction, it can be redevelopment, it can be revisioning of things, but I think before we can really have a more robust conversation about things like attracting Wahlburgers or a pickleball court or, you know, planning for those things, I think we have to really get kind of in the weeds on the mechanics of what new growth looks like and how we actually, how that can actually come to fruition. Because we can talk a lot about new growth and how it's positively can benefit a community or, you know, in some cases might negatively impact a community. But we can't really have those conversations until we talk about the actual pieces of that puzzle, which, you know, are infrastructure, open space, our roadway network, our transportation network. We really should be talking about growth in a holistic way. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of having a new planning department, is that is really the role of that department, is to kind of think about growth and change within the community in a way that is very holistic and does address those bigger conversations around infrastructure, around connections even to our neighboring communities. Like we really should be thinking about, and I think that kind of talks to the managed piece of this, is we are able to manage that new growth better when we have a very
Regional.
good understanding of where we are with the mechanics of growth. So I think that's really what we're trying to dive into a little bit more.
Yeah, I can give you a really good
yeah.
example too. So you have where we are right now, it's called the Downtown Rockland Revitalization Overlay. It's been here since 2016 or 17. It incentivizes proposals to come forward that are mixed use, so you retain commercial on the first floor and allow up to 3 stories residential above it. And, you know, it's a great incentive. It actually has some funding that you get from the state that's, you know, attached to the back end of it. So as you develop these units, in theory, like, they are self-fulfilling, right? Like, you're getting money for increasing the density. We have 0 projects that have come forward. And it's been in place, you know, for 8 years. There's been a couple of applications. We think people are going to pull the trigger, and they just can't get to the you know, the finish line. And I think that is tied to, you know, our current situation of water and sewer. And that isn't, you know, as Courtney indicated, that is not unique to Rockland as a regional issue. So we have been having conversations with our, you know, our neighboring communities to try and tackle this collectively as a region, because it seems like right now in time that's what's going to make sense, is to get it funded collectively. So that's kind of where we're at.
Does that answer your question, or did we get to what?
I think
like,
so.
or does anybody else have any questions about kind of like how we approach this type of topic? It's a very large and broad
Yeah.
topic,
Yeah.
so I think without like too much specificity, we can't really get into too many details, but I think like overarching themes are that we have to think about growth in a very holistic way moving forward.
Yeah, well, as far as residents are concerned, is there a situation where a town does not have to rely on debt exclusions and overrides?
a town like
Yes.
Foxborough doesn't,
Yes.
because they get a ton of
Yeah,
money from the Kraft
sure.
family at Gillette.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So
sure,
unless-
there are.
Slew of wealthy benefactors,
Yeah.
and ante
Okay.
up some.
It's unusual.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
just tossing it out
Buy
there.
Yeah.
Powerball tickets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe Lori, one last comment I would make is, I know different people have different desires for what kind of community they want to be in, you know, and it's like this in many places. I've experienced this here in Rockland, where many folks have said, we don't want more of anything here, we keep things the way they are. It's a small town, let's keep it a small town. And others are concerned about taxes, and they want more amenities, and, you know, they want to have more things available in town, whether it's a grocery store, or other retail, job opportunities, more housing, whatever. But I think that in general, if you are someone that you'd prefer not to have the town grow, you don't want more density, but you're also concerned about taxes, you're putting the town in an impossible situation, because without growing that base, the only way we can fund our operations is through, you know, increasing burdens on local taxpayers. So more density, more growth, you know, can help in the long run relieve the tax burden. That's my
Yeah.
financial
And
pitch at
density-
the end.
And density can look like revitalization. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to look
Right.
like, I know a lot of people point to like Quincy and Weymouth. Like, I don't think Rockland has the ability to sustain something quite like that. But it does have the ability to sustain some kind of density along some of its corridors. And I know that because I've seen historical images of that right here. And I do think that is, like, oftentimes what many residents who don't necessarily want to see new growth are looking for, is that kind of smaller town feel. You can still have that and have growth. They aren't exclusive.
They don't have to compete
They don't
with
have
each
to
other.
compete
They-
with each other.
yeah.
They can, if you manage your growth appropriately, then it can look different, but you have to allow for growth in order for you to manage it. And by you, I just mean municipalities, cities, towns. Like, you have to allow for growth in order for you to be able to manage where it goes, where it's placed,
And I know-
community input, like all of those things.
Yeah, and I know you guys are doing some really interesting studies on the blight properties around town,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. We have been working with a small kind of staff group of department heads who kind of interface in blighted properties in some capacity. So that would be, you know, the Board of Health, Building Department, Fire Department in some cases, sometimes Highway if it impacts different, you know, like systems, sometimes the Water Department if it impacts the Water Department. But really the goal is to kind of identify and try and help create a toolkit for our department heads and for the town to address some of these blighted properties that we've seen around town, basically in an effort to kind of either help those who are, you know, financially burdened and cannot continue to maintain their property and need some assistance, help them with some resources or point them in the right direction. We have CDBG, who has a very large wait list for those types of things, but also make sure that there's like a standard with which people expect that they should be keeping their property here. As a landlord, as a building owner, as a, you know, as a property owner here, like there are certain codes that we expect from, and that the state expects for residents to adhere to for safety reasons primarily. But we've been working on this for a little while, just kind of identifying a process for identifying properties, addressing those properties in their you know, corrective action, and figuring out, you know, different tools for us to add to our toolkit to help kind of bring those properties into compliance or address the issues that are there. We're not quite there yet, but we're working on it.
So, thank you. And the last thing I wanted to say is, you know, towns can have a scarcity mentality or an abundance mentality. So, I'm sure there's ways with water and sewer that, opportunities may come up that we just don't know about yet. And, instead of saying, oh, that's not happening, we can say, hey, how can this happen? And try to meet everybody's needs with the water and sewer situation. So it's a good first step, I guess. So.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
What, if anything, do you need from us in order to maybe better attack new growth?
It's a
Do you
really
need
good
us to,
question.
what assistance can we provide or whatever? Or we want to look at, I know, to give
Yeah.
incentives for businesses to come here, maybe like a TIF
Yeah.
or those type of things. Is that really what we should be talking about if we do want to get a pickleball court here or convince Wahlburgers to build something at the old Burger King? Is that more what we should be entertaining in order for that type of thing to potentially happen?
Actually, I think I
think
think
it's
tax
an option.
incentives are great options, they're great tools, especially when you have a specific target audience that
Okay.
you're trying to build up that relationship with. I think that's definitely something, in the,
That we can explore.
that
in
we
the
should be
future.
exploring in the
Okay.
near future to, get a handle on exactly what type of business Rockland wants here. I have a feeling that you guys are, big into like the locally owned mom and pop, and I think that that's fantastic. I think working in that community with in those spaces and identifying what they need, asking
Yeah.
like maybe some focus groups around those, and maybe you guys can get engaged in that and hear from them.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
helpful too.
Or hearing from existing business owners in those corridors on kind of what are the, like, biggest challenges for them when they're, even just when they're coming here and they're looking for guidance on something. Like, I think any way that we can kind of help people have an easier process in owning a business here or starting a business here, the first step of that is really like knowing, well, what should we be doing differently? What were the challenging things for you when you did come and want to start a business here? I think that the TIFs and DIFs and like those are good options, but I do think like ultimately at some point we have to figure out what is our capacity for something like
Right.
this. And I think that's really, like we need to figure that out so that we can be realistic about our approach and then also be realistic about some potential solutions to that capacity challenge. So I like the idea of, incentives, but I want to make sure that we can also meet those people when they come to us with the opportunity for that.
Yeah, there's no
So-
point in saying, come
Right,
here.
right,
Right.
We
but
say, oh,
there's-
sorry, you can't
Right.
come here. Yeah.
Like that is, I don't want to, that is somewhat of what we're doing with our 40R right now. We're incentivizing development in this corridor, but there's really no opportunity for them to develop.
So I'll pick
So-
up where you just kind of said that, when that passed, I think it was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When that passed, everybody thought that Union Street was going to be torn down, all the businesses were going to be torn down and redeveloped, and we'd have all these businesses lining up. Mike Mullen and Larry Ryan, we did a walking tour
Yeah.
with the Chamber of Commerce
Yep.
and a bunch of developers. And we thought we might get some traction out of it, but the little bit of traction that we got, they were hit right away with, we don't have water, we don't have sewer, we don't have capacity. So to that point, if, we can offer it, but if we can't give them what they need to
That's
be
the
open, then
mechanics.
it's no sense even approaching that part of the conversation. We also did a focus group, Mike Mullen and I at the time, and we invited all the PAC moms, to hear what they wanted to have in town.
That'd be-
And we got some great feedback from them. But you can't make a business come here. Some people are like, oh, we'd love to see Starbucks. I said, all right, well, like a coffee shop. They're like, no, Starbucks. They're like, oh, well, Starbucks doesn't want to open here, then I can't make them open here, So it's one of those things, it's got to be the right fit for the business. And if the demographics and the income and the infrastructure doesn't fit that business, then they're never going to come here. We just have to make it, I think, water capacity, sewer capacity, and make it an attractive place for a developer to want to come because we have that part of the infrastructure available to them. And then there's no stopping us. Then nobody will have an issue coming to Rockland. It's just that we don't have that available right now. So, we can talk to as many pickleball courts as you want, but if can't get water in the building, then they can't have a pickleball court.
So the GMUD project from a couple years ago, you're very familiar with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so you were working with a regional solution to water at least for that, right?
I think, yeah, A.W. Perry, I think, was looking to get water through Hingham, because they were abutting to the Hingham line, and I think they were looking to put money into, investing in the sewer plant to, create capacity and, address some upgrades at that point. And yeah, it would have been a development that had, I think it was, a movie theater, a small-scale supermarket, and then a brewery/restaurant district, which would have been nice. It would have been in what is now, I think, the MBTA zoning
Yep.
part of town, and that would have been great. Obviously, it didn't pass at town meeting, and eventually, as you start looking at the amount of new commercial growth, you start realizing what the tax revenues that it produce, then you can start having the conversation of potentially splitting the tax rate if it gets to that point where we're 75-25, but I think as it is, Megan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 82-18 or 80-20
Yeah.
right now? Yeah.
81-19.
81-19, so I had it surrounded, so, we're not even close to that conversation for saving the residents that, and to your point about having, any towns that don't depend on debt exclusions, obviously giant projects, that's the only mechanism, but there are ways that we can ease the tax burden on the residents overall throughout the year by trying to address those major issues. Unfortunately, we're not set up to be in a position to address water or sewer because we have water commissioners and sewer commissioners, so it's really up to them to put together a plan. And maybe for us, John, when you asked like what we could do, we can just stress the urgency in order to create this new growth and let them know that that's number one on our agenda, is to be able to create new growth in order to lessen the tax burden on our residents and get these businesses to invest in the town. And with that, it's investing in our water, investing in our sewer capacity, the I&I exchange, right? I think we're 11-1, but
Yeah.
that should be something that I think we can negotiate as, in a sense, as a town, like a host community agreement, the way we negotiated with the marijuana companies that came in. This is what it costs to do business in the town of Rockland. Do you want to be here? This is what you got to do. So I think our job is just to stress the urgency to the residents that infrastructure needs to be fixed. And if you build it, they will come, I think.
And maybe get them to help pay for it.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
It's as a partnership,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
community.
And most development would need
They
to
would.
pay some kind of mitigation,
Yeah.
and so there is that element of it. It's like helping to have a bigger conversation about what can growth look like. It can look very different than, what is typically put out there.
Imagine,
So.
yeah.
It feels like Rockland's going in a circle right now, right? Because every time I talk to someone who, even if they wanted, open anything, we don't have any water or sewer capacity. So we say no because we don't have water or sewer capacity, but we can't address the water or sewer capacity because we have to say no. So it's just like a giant
We're a lot of
circle.
problems, no solutions.
Yeah. But we'll get there.
So,
Yeah, working on
did
it.
you want to chime in on this, Dave?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right,
Smartest guy in the room.
yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, well, thank
All right,
you.
thanks.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
Next, we have report potential commercial development at Southfield, formerly the South Weymouth Naval Station. Doug?
Thanks, Tiffany. My advice is that we keep this agenda item pretty brief. I just wanted to update the board publicly and just let the public know. They may have heard the Abington Select Board talk about this agenda item, and it was worded almost the same, and our Southfield Redevelopment Authority reps are both up at the podium, Kelly and Tom, so obviously they should feel free to add whatever they'd like. But I just thought it was important that the community understand that, we all know what's happened with Union Point. The zoning got passed. They recently got all their state MIPA permits. That's a significant accomplishment. So now they're looking at the next phase, which is potentially lining up, actual developers, tenants, construction plans, et cetera. The chair of the Abington Select Board has really wanted to kind of tackle head-on the issue of water capacity, because that's something that Union Point will need in the short term as they continue making progress on their long-term plans for water, which would be the MWRA, and that's looking good. But at a minimum, they need water in the short term. So the Abington Select Board chairs convened some meetings with staff from both towns, as well as the developers at Union Point and the Joint Waterworks. There's going to be a meeting coming up in another week or two. I know Tiffany, at least Tiffany, will be joining me to that meeting along with our planner, Allison Quinn, who was just up here. So my main intention in asking Tiffany to put this on the agenda was just to let the public know, if they see that this has been discussed at the Abington Select Board level, to understand we're engaged, we're very involved, obviously respectful of the different entities that have their own elected boards and their own authorization. Things like the Joint Waterworks has, their own elected commissioners, but trying to work cooperatively with them. And I know Allison has been working with the planner from Abington to work with the superintendent at the Waterworks to really understand, what projects could be coming up in each of our respective towns, so they can really, identify what they have to set aside and what could potentially be available. So I know I said I'll be quick, and that was longer than I intended. But with that, it was really, my intent was just to give an update that, we're working as best we can to, in a cooperative manner, to help support the development team at Union Point, to potentially get as much managed, appropriate development, just like we've been talking about. It's a perfect segue. We didn't really plan it this way, but this is one of our biggest potentials for new growth in the town of Rockland, is our portion of the base. Because what gets built, even though it's at Union Point, that'll get counted toward our new growth. We'll be able to tax that property and those buildings. I don't know, Tom or Kelly, if you guys want anything more. I just thought a high-level overview would be helpful.
Just a couple things. Again, Tom Henderson from Southfield, along with Kelly O'Brien McKinnon, representing the town of Rockland. Doug, you summarized it great. The timeline has definitely moved up since we've had some good news, at Southfield with the MEPA permit being filed. We're in a phase of dealing with things like natural heritage for open space, Mass DOT to deal with all the traffic impacts, and then infrastructure, which is one of the things we talked about. It is a great segue from the earlier conversation. It is one of the challenges that we have, and it's in all three towns that we're working on. And we're working with state officials. They're very attentive to this project, knowing the density of housing and the potential commercial development that we have with our MEPA permit being signed. They understand that this project is probably one of the most important ones in the Commonwealth. So they are working to put resources towards that. We're continuing to work at them to look at water and sewer. But know that even if we were to sign tomorrow on things like water and sewer permanent solutions, those are going to take 5 to 7 years to get those here, because there are large requests, there are large needs to get that water to the development. So it's just planning, development, and getting it in place, again, 5 to 7 years. So we don't want to see Rockland be stagnant on that. We want to see, there's 106 developable acres over there. I think it goes right to your new growth question. It's expedited permitting. You look at 60 to 90 days to be able to permit projects. We have a lot of the things already in place. So again, I think it's one of the best places in Rockland. It's an area that will have little impact to the abutters. We obviously have to deal with traffic impacts, which we're working with the Rockland staff on, out to Route 3. We have an MBTA commuter rail. All the factors are there to really make this work. And I want to commend the staff, Doug, Courtney, Allison. It's been all hands on deck over the last few weeks, but over the last few years we've been talking about it. But where things have amped up, they've really been in the room, in the arena, trying to really make things work, along with Dave with the sewer, and Crystal and her team of the water department, the water commissioners. Everybody's really rowing in the same direction. They want to make this work, and they want to find solutions. So continue to do it, and hopefully we come up with some good things. I will tell you, the development team looks to close on this property in April of this year, which is very aggressive, and that means getting a lot of things done, like our DDA, which bonds the SRA with the developer. Right now, we're under an ENA, and they're looking at shovels in the ground in summer of this year to start doing horizontal infrastructure work and remediation of the open space. So things are going to start happening, and usually when they come out and say things publicly in our meetings, they hold to those timelines. So looking forward to it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great job,
Kelly,
guys.
I don't know if you have.
No, I mean, we're only hoping too with Rockland to emphasize the fact that it's mostly going to be commercial development. So that is such a small impact on the community, because it's such a generous tax base that we can utilize in other ways. So hopefully everybody will realize that.
Terrific. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. That was short, sweet, to the point,
There you
Doug.
go. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming.
Next, we have the Assistant Town Administrator, Courtney, back up at the table for the recommended uses of town opioid settlement funds.
And Courtney, if I can just do a very, very quick
Sure.
intro for you. So
You got it.
just as a reminder for folks, the town is one of, many towns in the Commonwealth that signed on to the national opioid settlements. So the money has started coming in, and it's recurring revenue. Can't remember at the top of my head. Some of them are 20 years, some of them are even longer. But it's continuing to grow because as more and more cases get settled, that gets added to the mix. So it could be Purdue Pharma or CVS or Walgreens or McKesson. I mean, it's going to continue to grow. Courtney put a lot of information in your packet. She'll go over it in depth. The reason why she's here is, if you recall, we set up a special purpose stabilization fund where we segregated all these monies because the terms of the settlements require that we keep it separate and only use it for appropriately related purposes related to substance abuse prevention, things like that. So we've set the money aside appropriately in the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, but we've never spent anything out of it yet. We've never gone back to town meeting for an appropriation because we really wanted to take our time and do our due diligence to figure out what was the most appropriate use of these funds. So Courtney spent a ton of time. I'll let her take it away because this is her work, but I think you'll be pleased.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Doug. All right, I'm going to put on my other hat here for a minute. So I thought it might be helpful to just give a little bit more background for you all, just about kind of these funds and what the total settlements are, et cetera, like that. So I'm gonna just share a little bit of that with you, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about just kind of our internal process for looking at these funds, what we've done so far, and who was involved in those conversations, and then also talk about kind of what that working group's recommendations are for this year's, at least, town meeting appropriation. So I think I'm just going to start by, reiterating what Doug said earlier. This is, something that many states are signing on to, but Massachusetts is one of them. In total, Massachusetts is expected to receive $990 million through 2036. 40% of those funds are given to municipalities to expend on approved programs and strategies, and 60% of those funds are used in the state opioid abatement fund. Just real quickly, a little bit about the background of kind of the use of funds. I'm going to try and distill this into some smaller information because there is a lot of background on it. But, there are basically 7 different categories that municipalities can use these funds for. And they're general, but relatively specific. So, opioid use disorder treatment, support for people in treatment and recovery, connections to care, harm reduction, addressing the needs of criminal justice involved persons, support for pregnant or parenting women and families who are, involved in opioid use disorder or have been impacted by opioid use disorder, and then prevention, misuse of opioids and prevention education. As of today, we have around $357,000 in the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, and we have had 2 working group meetings internally with many of the staff and departments who are interfacing with this issue more regularly. And then I've had lots of kind of one-on-one conversations with those department heads and those who they've recommended I talk to. We've done some outreach to other municipalities. I've sat on a few MMA webinars, and there's a great website, caremass.gov, opioidusedisorder.org, I think. That has a lot of information, a lot of training and resources. I envision that we'll probably use that as a resource as we continue to explore other ways for us to use these settlement funds. The working group members, I'm going to read them off because it's a little bit of a larger group, but Chief Zioli was part of these conversations, Chief Duffy, Jean Blaney, Recreation Department Director, our public health nurse, Kathy Ryan, our public health agent, Deli, Sergeant Brian McDonald, Lieutenant Steve Summers, myself, Freya Leahy, who's the high school adjustment counselor, and our human resources director, Lori Turinchuk. Each of these departments are already actively kind of engaged in this discussion, opioid, I'm going to just say this issue generally, because it is broad and it has broad impacts beyond just opioid use disorder. There's a lot of impacts outside of just active use or recovery. The ripple effect is big, and I think many people probably are aware of that and have experienced that themselves. But I just wanted to kind of share with you who was involved in these working group meetings. And really, they were a couple of hours, and it was a way for us to understand as a group, what are we already doing in this space? There's already a lot of work that's happening in Rockland around opioid use disorder. A lot of it is happening in the schools and through the police department and the fire department. Like, there's training that's happening. I know that the COA does some training too, I believe. So one of the things that we talked about early on is that the working group members are, and myself also, are already aware of a lot of great organizations locally and regionally that do this work, that are already running robust, impactful programs in all of these different categories. And so we felt that it wouldn't, that it would be most impactful for us to use some of these funds to support those existing organizations that are already giving back to our community and are already very active and engaged in our community. I've provided you with a few of those here, and I think those are kind of like the ones that we've identified as ones that we'd like to continue to figure out kind of which of those programs we're going to, that they run internally, which of those programs will we kind of engage to provide additional education or support or train the trainer types of programming for the town, for residents, for parents. So the actual implementation of this is still very much in progress, but the kind of thought process behind where we think these funds will be most useful for this upcoming year have been, presented in this one pager that I provided to you all. And so I'll just go through those. There's two main categories. One is to support existing local area coalitions and organizations. And we're considering, up to $40,000 worth of contributions to those organizations, which I'm told will go, far. And then the second piece of this is for the funding to support a co-responder or a mental health clinician, social worker position that will be housed in the police department, to go out with the police on, various calls that are related or may have some relation to opioid use, substance use, the follow-up from some of those, connecting those individuals with care or with treatment, with support services. That was kind of unanimously talked about by every one of these individuals who was involved in the working group, that we really need someone here in town that can help assist us with kind of responding to mental health related challenges, many of which are related to kind of the outfall of opioid use disorder. So I'm working with Lori, our new or not new now, but our HR director, to kind of see how it's modeled in other communities like this, like ours, so that we have a more clear roadmap for how we engage that person. But that is ultimately, those are the two pieces of, like two kind of categories that the group would like to propose for funding for the use of these opioid funds. It's, the total allocation is $160,000, and that will be for the year. And so that obviously isn't the full $357,000 that we have in our fund, but the thought process is that we will continue to hold working group sessions. We'll continue to kind of fine tune and build upon what we're starting here. We're gonna, hopefully the mental health clinician co-responder position works out exactly how we're planning it to, but it gives us the flexibility to go back and change things if we want to later, or to adjust things in the future. It also gives us the opportunity to see what other communities are continuing to do. There's not a ton of communities that are kind of like creating their own programming around this, other than kind of like your community outreach meetings looking for community input. But that, the direction that our group kind of took was to focus in on the co-responder mental health clinician position, social worker position, and support for existing organizations that are already doing a lot of this work, and that offer a lot of support for those who are in active kind of recovery and those who are impacted by the disorder generally. So I think I'm just going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions or comments. I think what I'm looking for from you all today is just some general feedback on kind of what either process or what we're planning to allocate these funds towards. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those or get the answers for those if I can't answer them tonight. And if you would like us to consider any additional pieces for funding, then I think that will be helpful for us now too. We have another meeting scheduled in March, and so I think our goal is to kind of fine tune and finalize our warrant article by that deadline, that next meeting in March, which I think is the 18th that our internal group is meeting.
And just to piggyback on what Courtney said, I want to thank her for all that work. The end result, this is purely a policy decision, so this is like squarely in your plate to decide if you agree with this or want to do something different. The end result of this will need to be a warrant article at town meeting so we can appropriate the funds. Hypothetically speaking, if you wanted to adopt this exactly as is, I haven't talked to council yet, but my hope would be that we can write it broadly to give some flexibility, and it would say something like, will the town, vote to expend from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund an amount for co-responder, mental health clinician, social worker, and additional support to local areas and coalitions. Because who knows, maybe the exact mix of 40,000, 120 wasn't perfect. Maybe it should be 50,000, 110, whatever. And so that way, so just to be clear, I don't think you need to get that specific tonight. I think the main thing is just, are we headed in the right direction?
Yes.
Right.
Just a question.
Yeah.
The clinician, social worker, what department they work in?
They would be in the police, we would be
Police,
manned in
Board
the
of
police
Health, Fire?
department.
Okay.
Yes.
So they'd be in police, okay.
Yes. That's what that's the direction we're moving in currently.
Okay.
Yes.
I think it's a great idea. I think all of this, it makes sense. I mean, obviously, I'm the generation that this is really affected, and it's been one of our goals from the start. I think we were one of the first towns to get involved in this litigation against Big Pharma and the opioid developers. Fortunately, it didn't work out too well for us the first time we went for it, but it seems to be, getting back to us now, which is great. And I can't speak enough about the work that these groups that you guys have chosen. There's a couple other ones, Rockland Recovery House does an excellent job as well. But, specifically Rockland Cares, I've reached out to them several times for people that I know, and they've always been able to, react with the highest level of information, and in some cases have called and gotten people rooms, and it's important, I think, that people understand, and are educated. And I'd like to see, Chief Zioli, with you being here, an expansion of the DARE program. I know that there is a grade in the school right now that didn't get DARE because it's COVID year. So they never graduated, never went through the DARE program. I think they're current ninth graders. So if there's an opportunity to do DARE at the high school as well, to kind of reiterate that for them, but especially the ninth grade class right now, because they never went through it. So, and from what I hear from my daughter, it's kind of a troubled class. So, yeah, but I support everything on this proposal. I think it's great idea.
I do have just a couple questions.
Yeah, of course.
How much more money are we expected to get from the settlement? This is where I don't know enough. I wasn't involved with when we came to this agreement to settle. So
Yeah, I don't know that we can really confidently answer that. I think
Okay.
what we have seen, like this year, have been increments of $30,000 here and there, and it depends on the settlement, and then
Okay.
our portion of the settlement. So I think that that's really why they don't boil it down as much. I can look into that and see if I can figure that number out.
You probably can, if it's the
probably can.
990 million, right?
Right.
60% to the state, and then
Yeah.
40% divided by 351
Yeah, I guess I
towns,
could
based
do
on
it
whatever
that way.
it would be. Initially, the first settlement, the first suit that we got into, they were settling for 650 million with the state, and, well, with the towns, the 118 towns that sued. We were in the mass tort together.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, when Mara Healy was the Attorney General, the state stepped in and they took 60% off the top for their opioid prevention program, and then gave the 40% to the rest of the cities and towns, but not just the 118 that sued, it was all 351. So I think Rockland's share on that was 13,000 a year for 18 years, as opposed to the 15 million that we were supposed to have been getting, so.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point, like, I think that is the challenge, is that every settlement looks different. And so, I don't even know that all the settlements have come in yet, so I think every settlement looks a little different, and so I have to look into that, I
And to
guess,
Doug's
is the
point,
easiest
there's
way
new
to
settlements every
answer
day,
that.
there's new court cases that are coming up every day, and
Yes,
if we're all
that's-
in it together, then this could be going on for years.
For a while.
Hopefully it doesn't, because that means that opioids are no longer an issue for us.
Right.
But, the way I see it now, it's gonna continue to go, and
Yeah.
they're gonna continue to sue,
I think, according to this, like, we're supposed to get funds through 2036 at a minimum right now. And I don't think they were large sums at the beginning, but they have been increasingly larger over time. I can get kind of the background and get that to you. if
yeah,
that's
I guess
helpful.
kind of where I was
Yeah.
going with that is hypothetically, we don't get another nickel in.
Sustainability of it.
2 years, we've blown through it all if we do this again next year.
Yep.
So I, kind of putting my financial hat on,
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to add an FTE, pay it through a grant, essentially, it's not quite a grant, but you know what I'm kind of getting
Yeah.
at. And then
How we
3 years
structure
from
it.
now we're going to put it into our budget. So if I had a better idea of, if we can expect this to go through 2030, something where we're going to get enough to potentially pay for it, all right, well, that's a little
Right.
different than, in 2028's budget, we're going to be looking for 120,000 to continue to pay this
Yeah.
much-needed person.
Right.
I don't doubt we need it. And that
Yeah.
120, is that including like all the associated
ben-
benefits?
Correct.
All
And,
that?
and that's
Okay.
actually a little bit on the high range.
Okay.
But I just wanted some flexibility in there. I think realistically, we're looking at somebody with like in the $60,000 to $70,000 range plus benefits. And we likely can offer some kind of supervision, but these are some of the things that would allow us to hire like an LCSW and then get their LICSW by being supervised by some people who have volunteered for that here, but I'm still working out some of that back end HR-related details and still trying to determine what the best model for us is moving forward, because there are other models out there for the co-responder mental health clinician position. There are other municipalities who may contract, like with I think it's like Bristol County has a contracting company that will send, who has a licensed mental health clinician, and like communities can have them for like a day, and so there are different ways that we can look at staffing this position, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And the group's preference, I think, is to try to bring someone in full-time so that we aren't kind of at the mercy of what that agency is able to offer us, because really we feel like there's a need that we could fill with this. And so I totally get your point, though, about sustainability of the position, and I think that is definitely on the mind of those in the working group too. And I think ultimately we would continue to also look for additional funding that wouldn't just be opioid settlement funding to support a position like that as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we've kind of sliced this, but that is where we landed for this year, and I'll definitely look into kind of like the longevity of and what the total amount potentially could be, so that we can make a better decision about that.
Okay, and I think I kind of asked this, but again, I'm going to just make sure that, like the indirect costs, like the employer's portion of their health care.
Correct.
We can take that, even though we're not giving it to the employee, we can include that in, because a health plan could cost $50,000 if depending what's offered. So that gets pretty pricey pretty quick. That expense that the town's portion of that
is included in this.
But that's an eligible way to spend this money.
I need to verify.
Because that could be, if they pick like a PPO, family plan, it's going to be, north of $50,000 for that type of a health insurance plan. So I just want to make sure that it's covered.
That's a fair question, John.
Good question, actually.
And I just wanted to add on that my intent is to not create a permanent liability in the town budget in the future, so that whoever we hire, it would be very clear that this like a grant-funded position, like you said, it's subject to the availability of funds. So if, 10, 12 years from now, the funding isn't there, we can reevaluate it. If we want to absorb it in the budget, great. But if we find out we can't for whatever reason, then that position wouldn't remain. So that was a thought, would be to use the funding while we have it.
And I think from what I've been following and whatnot, to have the position of the mental health clinician, social worker, working in conjunction and out of the police department, it seems to serve as the perfect bridge, because not only to be able to help facilitate with compassion, but help really focus on these services and resources that are available, because Chief Zioli, your department has been doing so much of this already, you know what I mean, just because it's innate in the day-to-day, but to be able to have someone that will be responsible for this and help that resource grow is to me is wonderful. And I did want to just bring up, because Rockland has been so affected, as Mike was talking about earlier, I'd really love to learn a little bit more about the various educational opportunities, programs, resources that could become available or could be available for the kids, because I really do feel like, that's where it all starts, and it's our opportunity. And so many of these kids have been just have been affected because of the nature of how this community and this town has been affected. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what could potentially be out there. And then also just knowing that, I know that DARE is a great program, but are there any more kind of comprehensive or you know, supporting programs
Yeah.
that can kind of help, you know, further address the, you know, the opiate issues, you know, beginning at a very early age. So I
Yeah.
think that I'd love to learn more about that, and I think that there could be, I think there's a need, and I think there's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, I think that the goal of the engagement with the local organizations is to also make that accessible to the community residents from, like, in various formats and settings. And I think that with that particular space, like, and the group, I think, will be looking for feedback from residents on kind of what are the areas that you think would be most beneficial for us to offer to the community, because we do offer some things already through, like, as you mentioned, through the police department, through the schools, through their collaboration with the schools, through the rec department. You know, like, there are existing programs that we offer that kind of touch on that ripple effect. Like, Freya was giving a few examples, but just like they do, you know, a wellness workbook, they do an Narcan training, you know, like, there are certain things that are currently underway. So I think hearing from residents will also be, and hearing from you all will also be helpful for us when we're working with these local organizations to determine, like, where really are we looking for support, like, specifically, because there's a lot of different ways that we can try to drive impact, and I think we need to know specifically outside of the schools, like, where does that impact need to go.
So I just wanted to add, are you done?
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to add, great work with this, excellent job, and I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. I agree with especially the mental health person on the police force, because a couple years ago I was at the Mass Municipal Association, and there was a lot of buzz and discussion about this, and they had statistics to, you know, as to how it really supports prevention of overdose deaths. So, yeah, if not many towns you mentioned are actually implementing this, we're way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So thank you for being open to that. So.
Any more questions? I'll follow up with everyone on the kind of questions that came up that I didn't have the answers to, but, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other new business not reasonably anticipated?
No, we hit that earlier with Tom Rubin.
That's right, okay. Next, we have old business. Southshore Regional Vocational Technical School Building Project Election Update. Doug?
Thanks, Tiffany. So I'll keep this very quick, you know, just for the public to learn if they haven't read about it already. The Southshore Tech Building Project passed at the regional election, and the debt exclusion question also passed here in Rockland. And I put in your packet all the certified results from each town. And what I was really kind of shocked or surprised at two things. One was that it easily passed every single town. You know, it really wasn't even close. And I was also very pleasantly surprised that Rockland had the greatest turnout amongst all the towns, and we're not the largest town amongst all the towns, so that was impressive, and I'm pleased about that Rockland voters showed up. So again, I think it's a good thing that we have our funding lined up to pay for our share when those costs really start hitting us in a couple of years. That was really all I had. I just wanted to announce it for the public that the project passed, and it passed pretty easily in every single town.
Great. Next, we have FY26 budget.
Thanks, Tiffany. I know that this meeting's gone on a bit, so I'll do this next part quicker than I had planned, but I'm just going to sit over there and go through a quick presentation. I was just going to thank our town accountant who's in the back room, Scott Curtis. I want to thank him in particular for all the work that he has been doing to help with this whole effort. So this presentation is structured kind of similar to how I've done it in prior years. It kind of gets a little bit more abbreviated each time. I'm happy to slow down and cover anything in more depth that you want, but just in recognition of the time and also the fact that we have an executive session, I'll go a little bit quicker. So some of our budget objectives, it changes from year to year. This year, we're not looking at adding staff and expanding services. We're really just looking to make sure that we're able to afford some of the required increases in our county retirement assessment. I've talked about that a bunch. The county has an accelerated funding schedule that's been pretty difficult for every town in the region to be able to accommodate this year. I'll show you the numbers, but it's a large increase. Similarly, our health insurance premiums are projected to increase. That's a regional and statewide and national problem, not unique to Rockland or Plymouth County. And our property and liability insurance is also going up. So those three obviously have to get fully funded. We're hoping we want to maintain level services. I think the biggest departmental increase we have is in our IT budget, and I want to be very clear we're not increasing staff in the IT budget. These are really for things outside of our control, for all the various licenses, for all the different types of products and services that we subscribe to, and a significant investment in cybersecurity, which is critically important and only getting more important every day. So there's some significant increases that were requested. We're not, at this point today, able to fund all those. We're only really looking at funding about half of them, but even still, funding half is still a significant increase. And then currently, I don't have anything programmed for our reserves to put into our reserves, OPEB stabilization or capital stabilization, but I know that it's an objective of the board, and so as our future iterations of the budget unfold over the next several weeks, we'll try to make that happen. Quickly, I thought I'd go through the financial dashboard. We've gone through this in the past. Just starting in the upper left-hand corner, our current tax rate. Our single-family average tax bill is now a little over $7,000. For comparison purposes, the statewide average single-family tax bill is over $7,700. So we're clearly about a little under $700 below the average. I do think it's important to highlight, because this point's been brought up to me by taxpayers, and it's a completely valid point, that while that is true, our ability to pay in Rockland is not the same as every other community throughout the state. And there's different metrics that the DOR puts out that looks at, median family income, average household income, things like that. And when you kind of overlay that, the burden is worse in Rockland because, again, of our ability to pay. So I do want to recognize that, and at some point, I'll update this to include a statistic like that. We haven't touched our reserve fund yet, so that we're in good shape there. Free cash was submitted in a timely manner. Our Department of Revenue rep has been out sick for a while, so that we're kind of in a queue waiting to get approved. So what we're working with here is what we anticipate and hope our certified number will be. Our state aid as a percent of the total budget. Again, this is sort of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's good that we have a relatively high proportion of our budget funded from state aid, because that's not coming from property taxes. The downside to that is, as we get reliant on that aid, when the state has a difficult fiscal year and we don't get much of an increase in state aid, it really hurts our budget a lot worse than other communities that aren't as reliant on state aid. So as a result, we're forced to make reductions that other communities might not, because they've built it into their own tax base. Sewer Department has created their own capital stabilization fund. They haven't funded it yet, but they have established it. Our OPEB numbers are still big, over $100 million liability and a little over $1.3 million in the trust fund. Like every other community, we're doing our best. Going up to the right-hand side of the page, our property tax collections are still very strong. Bond rating is still strong. The stabilization fund balance was interesting. The number, the dollar amount there in our balance is the current balance, $1.6 million. The percentage of the current operating budget, rather than calculate it myself, I pulled it from a Department of Revenue publication. So it's not current, but it's like the first time in my time here that it's got us over that 3% mark, which is really good. We should be proud of that, and we should obviously continue to expand that. But that's the first time that's got out of the unfavorable category. Our capital stabilization fund, we got over $300,000. We're working on that. The Joint Waterworks has their own. And then the projects down in the lower right-hand corner that we've been talking about, ad nauseum, the whole time I've been here, are still there. Some of the price tags go up. Things like the fire station, but we've cut back from the original proposal. I did add in the Eston School and Rec Department project. We're still working on the details of that, so that dollar amount is TBD. And some of the town hall, school, HVAC, electrical lighting projects, we'll go over that in a moment on a different sheet, but I did want to add that because if you lump them all together, it does total about $3 million, but we have some strategies on how to tackle that. And also the Pleasant Street landfill, capping that per DEP requirements. The liability is about $5 million, but we have talked before that we're exploring an option to have a private developer do some work in a public-private partnership that could get that done at zero cost to the town. So after talking with Tiffany, we're hoping that could be on maybe the first agenda meeting in March to have a preliminary discussion on that. Any questions on the kind of what I call the dashboard? Make sense? All right. Couple of highlights. Our Southshore Tech assessment. Again, this is not related to the new building project. This is the regular annual assessment. Actually went down by a little over $32,000, which is good. And I think the main purpose of that is that the superintendent indicated they're looking at using stabilization funds in FY26 to cover some of their expenses. I want to note that I just got this updated number, like literally just got it, so that's not yet reflected in the budget you have in front of you. But again, this is a working document, so that's updated now. In the next version you get, it'll reflect it. Our health insurance premiums, again, like every other town throughout the state and private sector, state, everyone's facing increased health insurance premium increases. And one of the major drivers, I should say, what's driving it potentially in Rockland is not our experience. It's not that we've had people getting sicker or people inappropriately using the services. Again, it's a national trend of the expanded use of pharmacy benefits, of all the drug ads that everybody sees on TV. Those things, they add up. There's significant cost that ends up getting factored into premiums. And I'm not disparaging that. These things have good health effects for folks, but there's a serious cost to it. What I put 8 to 10 because that's what I'm being told right now is a reasonable estimate. What's plugged into the budget you have in front of you is a 9% increase. There's still a chance it could be a little bit lower, like 8, maybe even 7. We'll see. I want to just be careful. John's saying the other way.
It's probably going to be higher.
I hear you.
I'm hearing like even higher. Like in Mansfield, we're looking at maybe 15 to 20.
Yeah.
So if you get 8 to 10, you'll be very happy. I think. So yeah.
That's good perspective to have. I knock on wood. I feel like we should be in the 8 to 10 range, but I don't want to jinx us. But so that's a significant hit for us. As far as the governor's budget, our preliminary cherry sheet came out. It was good. Bottom line, even though bottom line isn't the best number to use because certain departments like the schools and the library gets certain pieces of funding directly to them, but just generally bottom line, we're looking at a 1.1 million increase in state aid net of any increases in assessments. So we do the 70-30 split calculation. So the total amount available to split once we back out certain shared expenses is 1.3 million. You can see the split right there. And I've shared these numbers with Dr. Cron and Jane Hackett, and I'll be meeting with them in person on Friday. Similar to prior years, I just thought I'd show just some couple of simple pie charts, just showing where our money comes from and where it goes. So you see regular property taxes at 52% on the right side, then up top the debt exclusions at 7%. Of course, debt exclusions are property taxes too, so you can kind of add those together and it's 59%, which is not unusual. We're highly reliant on property taxes. State aid, local receipts are the other big categories. And then our major expenses. This hasn't really shifted too much from year to year. I do have that footnote on the right with the education box that number, that 33.85 million, also includes the Southshore Tech, Norfolk Agricultural, and the Aggie transportation expenses. Obviously, some of the expenses for benefits and insurance also relate to the schools, just like they also relate to the general government departments too. So I don't have it broken out here, but those benefits and insurance numbers are aggregate. So I just thought that's obviously the school department's our largest single department. then you can see the other categories. But, benefits is significant for us. As far as process goes, we had our budget request forms sent out to every department head like we've done every year since I've been here. And what I have presented to you tonight is our first draft of a balanced budget. At the general government side, approximately a 3.4% increase. And unfortunately, I felt obligated to put that last bullet down that, again, because we do budget request forms, every department head, can submit what they think they need for the upcoming year, even if it's an increase above staffing or other budget line items they've had in the prior years. And while we have that, and I have information in your binders that has a lot more detail, unfortunately, we're just not able to fund most of it just due to revenue constraints. As it relates to salaries, I know there's a lot of words on here, and I apologize. It's a very busy slide, but big picture, all of our union contracts expired. We're in the process of negotiating all those contracts right now. There's a few remaining staff that have statutorily authorized independent employment agreements. So, for example, I have a contract, the police chief has a contract. So if those contracts are going to be in effect next year, we know what those salaries are. Those are programmed into the budget. Everybody else, whether it's a union employee or a non-union employee that's off a contract, we've not programmed in any salary increases yet because I want to wait until we get through negotiations so we know exactly what we'll need to fund. So what I have plugged into the budget and the select board budget is that one single lump sum for wage adjustments that once all the contracts get settled and when then I determine what we'll do for the non-union folks, then we can allocate it out later. But that'll be after the warrant is set because this just won't get done in time for them. This is the same way we did it 3 years ago. So again, as highlighting just kind of the 5 biggest increases. So these are all expenses. So the Plymouth County Retirement Assessment has a $511,000 increase. Again, that's significant for us. Our health insurance estimate right now, the increase is $934,000. Property liability, almost $125,000. Again, the IT and the various IT-related increases were actually double that amount, $200,000, but we had to balance. So I believe that what will be selected out of here will really focus mainly on all the required licenses that we need to have for all of the different software and services that we use, and on the most critical cybersecurity functions, both services and hardware. And then lastly, our regional dispatch costs are going up by almost $95,000 because the grant finally expired. We benefited tremendously by in those 5 years of that state 911 grant, but it's a limited grant, so now we have to pick up the full cost. Again, I know it's an objective to put money in the reserve, so that's not shown in this version, but that's something I'm going to work on trying to figure out before we finalize the budget. So then switching to some of the capital requests, I'm not going to read off the screen because you do have this document in a large ledger-sized paper, but just to kind of summarize that first column with numbers, the request column, you'll see it totals almost 10.7 million. So you can see if we assume 3.1 million in free cash, that's, we're over by 7.5 million. So I just took a stab. This was just me, trying to use some judgment to try to figure it out. I plugged in a number for snow and ice deficit, 260,000. That was what we ended up appropriating in the prior year. And then I moved a few things over that would not be funded. There's one thing like an ambulance, which the fire chief said can be pushed out to a later year. That small multi-departmental mailing folder machine, we're able to fund that outside of this. But you'll see in that next column over, recommended combined Prop 2.5 exclusion. What I'm doing there is there's 5 projects. The first is the Town Hall complete replacement of our whole HVAC system in the whole building. I'm happy to talk about that in more depth whenever you want. Long story short, these units that you see on the wall here are original to the building. They're all starting to fail at the same time because they're the same age. They don't make them anymore. We can't get parts. And it's a real problem, especially for some of the smaller departments that they only have one unit, and when it breaks, they're having to bring in portable units. That's a nightmare. I had a full engineering study done because of the size of the building and the complexity of everything. I came up with multiple options. I'll share the engineering report with you. The best option the engineer came up with will cost about $1.5 million. So that's a significant cost. If you go down toward the bottom, you'll see there's 4 school projects. HVAC controllers and software for $100,000, middle school, high school lighting upgrade for $100,000, middle school, high school HVAC replacement for $500,000, and Eston School electrical upgrade phase 2 for $800,000. Courtney is working very hard with the school department and with her contacts, both at National Grid and at the Green Communities program, to see if we can fund kind of any of this through Green Communities grants or National Grid, incentive programs. So that's something she's working on, and we will keep pursuing that. The reason why I have those kind of combined in one column is, and I want to stress, not this year, because I know voters just voted for Southshore Tech, and we're going to be having a fire station on the ballot in town meeting. But maybe in a future year, whatever we don't get funded through grants and through National Grid, since these are all kind of similar types of projects, maybe we lump them together in a one-year exclusion and see if voters would be willing to fund it that way. Again, happy to talk about that more now or at another time, but I'm not recommending we do it for this upcoming year. But I have to also caveat it and say I haven't had my discussion yet with Dr. Cron and Jane Hackett about their requests, so I'm meeting with them on Friday. If some of these are more urgent and can't wait until a later year based on what they say, I'll obviously loop back to you. Moving one column over for other funding, you can see the ladder truck for the fire department, $2 million. I've talked about that a few times before. We talked about it at a finance team meeting earlier today. I've kicked around the idea of whether it makes sense to combine that in with a fire station project or keep it separate. Through our team's discussions earlier today, I think our consensus is kind of keeping it separate is better. Proposing it at the same time, makes sense, but, giving people the option to, have the most choice could make sense. So there's the ladder truck, and it takes a number of years for that to get built. Once you get it, once you authorize it, we can't just snap our fingers and get it a month later. It literally takes a couple of years. The other option is to do a lease purchase. So the benefit of that is you don't have to come up with $2 million all at once. The downside is, the lease to own payments could be, depending on the terms, $250,000, $275,000 a year. So then the concern is if future free cash appropriations drop, and right off the top we got snow and ice for $250,000 or $300,000, and then a lease payment on a truck for another $250,000, $300,000 right out of the bat, we could be committing a huge chunk of our potential free cash without having the ability to do any other capital purchases. So I don't think the lease, and there's also a greater cost because you're kind of paying more interest than you would through other financing mechanisms. So that's not preferred in my book. Moving down that column, the $60,000 for the finishing the Little League fencing on Spring Street. So the good news there is, if you recall, we funded half of it last year's town meeting, and then the other half was going to be determined later. I got a call last year on very short notice, which I get periodically from our state senator and state rep, from Senator Keenan's office, saying, hey, real quick, do you have any projects you'd like to ask for an earmark? And there's certain parameters of dollar amounts and types of uses, things that are most likely. So I went to our list and remembered that we didn't fund half of that, so I put in for it. Didn't think anything was going to come of it. I just got confirmation from Senator Keenan's office that it was included as an earmark, and that is going to be funded from the state.
Oh, nice.
So that's great. The CPA may have an article. They're worried that the CPA committee and the Parks Commission, that costs could be increasing just with talks of tariffs and all kinds of other economic turmoil. So they might look at an article to cover any delta if they're a little bit short. Underneath that is replacement of the bicentennial track. Again, that's the more current number, 2.6 million. That includes, the complete replacement and reorientation of the track and the field, all the related improvements for shot put and javelin, that kind of stuff. Also includes bleachers, like nice grandstands, and lights. So that's a pretty robust program. Again, that would be funded without raising taxes through the Community Preservation Act. It would be bonding with a debt service paid from the CPA revenues. And then a portion of the police cruisers, the column all the way to the right, is what little remaining marijuana host community agreement funds we have would help defray the cost of the cruisers. Again, this is a work in progress. I'm happy to take any feedback you have on that at any time. Next steps is the same as always. We'll keep monitoring the budget. Generally, we don't get more information, hard information, before we have to make a decision, but we'll keep our ears listening. And then, again, we'll continue to refine things, work with the schools, work with, Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee. I always have an aggressive time frame here because I don't like scheduling something and cutting it too short when we got to get the warrant posted and properly noticed. So my hope would be, if possible, if we could have a final budget approved by your meeting on March 18th, the next night, the 19th, the Finance Committee could take all their final votes. Ideally, it would be that, we could go 2 weeks later to April 1st, if absolutely necessary. But again, my hope is to get everything to you in time so you feel comfortable and can have your votes, and we can be done by the end of March. And that gives me time to get, final reviews on the warrant and, get that approved by legal and get it posted by the constable. So I know I went kind of quick. I guess the last thing I'll say is you do have in your budget, in your binder, the entire line item budget. And then at the end of that, you have the capital list that I talked about earlier. And I should have also mentioned, I didn't put it on the screen, but at the beginning of this section of your binder where you have the financial dashboard, the next page after the financial dashboard, if you want to just flip to that, it's a landscape type page. This has been sort of my working document for looking at requests and what we're able to fund and how we balance it. So this shows, I only gave highlights in the PowerPoint. This really shows all the detail. So, I won't go through and read it all. You can look at it yourself. But you can look at all the other things that were requested, things we're not funding. As I look at this now, maybe a couple things I should just very briefly highlight. We still don't have a facilities director, and that, still poses a real problem, but it's not a simple solution, so that's why we haven't figured it out yet. One thing I am recommending in this budget are a couple of stipends for people that have been already doing the work, and we haven't been compensating them for that. So I think temporarily, until we get a facilities director, it's only fair to do that. So I have one recommended stipend of $7,500 for Dave Taylor, who does an unbelievable amount of facilities work that it's not in his job description, and he doesn't have to do it, but he helps us because he has the best interest of the town at heart. Similarly, the Tom Rubel, I have a slightly smaller recommended stipend for him, just frankly because it's just a different level of work. But he does a lot of work to help me, mainly in this building, in that regard. In addition, so those would have a general fund cost while we fund those. I'm also proposing a $10,000 stipend for cemetery oversight, also for Dave Taylor, because again, that's something that is not in his job description, and somebody had to do it, and he stepped up, and we have successfully taken over the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, and there's a lot to it, both on the back end administratively, managing the systems to properly oversee a cemetery, but also literally on short notice, going out, marking out a plot, coordinating, like digging burials for a grave on short notice. So that would be funded through our cemetery revolving fund. And then the only other thing I think that would be helpful to highlight is there's one request that I don't have funded yet in this version, but I'd like to try to find a way to fund, which is, and it's relatively small in the big scheme of things, in the fire department, increasing the executive assistant's hours from 35 to 40 hours a week. That's something that I think is warranted in talking to the chief, and I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I think in reality she's already working those hours, and we really should be compensating for the level of work that needs to be done and is being done. So that's something I want to try to build in my next version of the budget. But I thought this summary would be helpful for you, because this was kind of how I approached it when we were out of balance by millions. I just had to tally them up, and then this is sort of how I went about making my recommendations. So again, health, I think in closing, health insurance, we're going to keep our eye on. see if we can get that number realistically any lower. Same thing with property and liability insurance. And I'm just trying to think, Scott, were there any other variables on the cost centers aside from those two? that are- Yeah.
We already got the VOTEC number.
'Cause we- Right. That's what I got on the budget right now. I'm happy to answer. I know it's a lot of information I threw at you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, two things. Dave, do you ever get any sleep? No. All the things you do? Yeah, okay, wondering. Secondly, there's an organization called the Leary Firefighters Foundation, and they're the only group in the entire country that funds equipment, vehicles, education, training, and technology for firefighters nationwide. So that might be
That's great.
something to look into. I'll send you the link.
That's great. No, I appreciate it. I'll mention later in my town administrator report that fire chief just got another grant from the state for equipment, so we're.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
pretty good in that regard, but we'll look at every
Well, maybe they can-
opportunity that's there, we'll
They
follow
might
up.
pay for a truck, who knows? You know, we'll be able to. That's it.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, so far so good? No big directional changes that you have? Okay, that's great. As you don't have a meeting planned in 2 weeks, I'll have an updated budget for your March 4th meeting, which I think by then, it should be pretty solid unless there's specific changes you want to make. That's my goal, would be for that 1 month from now, that March 4th meeting. And that still gives you a whole other meeting 2 weeks later to, make any other changes you might want. I'll go back over there.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have emergency shelter update. Thank you, Courtney.
Sure. Okay, I'll be brief. Just a quick update for you all, which I believe I sent out at the end of last week, but as of last Friday, I believe, we got a notice from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which is the state agency that oversees the emergency assistance shelter system, that the EA shelter site at the Comfort Inn would be closed by April 30th of 2025. So that's April of this year. Currently, there are 74 families there. They will no longer be there as of the end of April. So I thought you all would want to know that. I did ask about the reimbursement. I haven't heard back on that for the earlier kind of funds that we had expended for some supplies at the very beginning, back in October, I think, of 2023. So I'll let you know when I do hear back on that. And, that's really it. It's just that, the governor had announced that they had a plan to close the emergency assistance shelter sites that were located in hotels by the end of this coming year. And, the Rockland site is planned for closure at the end of April. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that. EOHLC is working directly with the hotel on the contracts. I don't have any information about kind of when the hotel will be reopened to the public or anything like that at this time. But I just thought that it would be important for you all to know that that is in progress. So,
Thank you.
any questions?
Other old business not reasonably anticipated?
I have none.
Next, we have select board liaison updates. Select board member O'Loughlin.
I've been working with the Open Space Committee, but nothing to really report tonight, but maybe in a few weeks.
Okay. Select board member Allard.
No updates.
Okay. Vice chair Childs.
No updates. I was going to do a highway update, but Dave did it earlier, so, yeah,
All right.
thanks.
Next, we have town administrators report and correspondence.
Thanks, Tiffany. 4 items. One is I want to announce that the Parks Commissioners appointed Justin Bodio as the new Park Superintendent, replacing Peter Ewell. I want to congratulate Justin. He's going to be a great addition to all our department heads. We're really happy for him. So I think that was a great choice. Next, I want to mention that and I think you have this in your packet, our town collector, Judy Hartigan, has resigned from the Charter Maintenance Committee and the Charter Review Committee. So I'm just going to kind of leave this out there as a rhetorical, I guess, comment that I don't really think there's enough time to advertise for this and fill it in time for them to get their recommendations to you, because it's already February and your next meeting's March 4th, and you got to have all this wrapped up by the end of March for the warrant. So you guys can tell me to do something different, but I kind of feel like for this particular exercise, I don't know that there's really time, but I'll defer to you if you guys have different thoughts about that. But I want to thank Judy for all her work on both committees. It's much appreciated. Third, as Dave Taylor mentioned earlier, we did produce an owner's project manager request for qualifications for the sewer department. So we have issued that. It's on the town website, due on February 12th, as Dave said. And this is really important. I know there's a lot of questions about all the different improvements that are going to be happening and who's managing this, who's watching it, who's checking the engineers to make sure they're not over-designing, all that stuff. That's the job of the OPM, of the owner's project manager. They represent the town, not the builder, not the contractor, not the engineer. They represent the taxpayers. So I looked at the plan holders list thus far, and there's some really good big engineering firms that are independent that would be a great fit. There'll be a review team that the sewer commissioners will approve, and ultimately it'll be up to the sewer commissioners to award that contract. And then last, also relating to sewer, I participated in a Zoom meeting recently, just last week, with the EPA, along with town council, the interim superintendent, Dave Taylor, and the Veolia operators. The EPA had a lot of questions about the sewer plant's prior reporting to the EPA. They're still concerned about the flow from the plant. Dave Taylor, Veolia, the commissioners, and town council will be responding to their latest questions. They'll be able to get all the information that's needed. But I just wanted you and the public to understand that, at the end of the meeting, I had a pretty sincere explanation to the EPA, trying to convey to them, how much planning and funding has taken place by the town to try to address the situation, and that, we've all been working really hard to try to reorganize things after the sewer commissioners quit and left the department vacant except for one admin assistant. So I really just tried to convey that, we were put in a tough spot, but as a community, and I showed them the numbers, how much ARPA funding you've dedicated for specific things, and really tried to convey the seriousness that we take it, knowing that we're all one town and we have to address this. And they had their poker faces on, but hopefully they, understand that, and we'll keep moving forward. That's all I have.
Can I ask a question on the charter? Just from, for them having their meetings and having a quorum. When we appointed this new committee, we made it a 6-person committee, right? Because that's the number of people we put on it. So they can still have a quorum with 4, right? That's because it used to be a 9-person committee, and that would mean literally all 5 of them would have to be there. So if someone is not there, they're still cool with being able to meet.
Yeah, we wrote it as 6 for this one as opposed to.
Okay, I just want to be sure that it wasn't, that they're not going to run into a
Yeah,
quorum
right,
issue
you're
if
right.
they run into, and then with Judy leaving the permanent committee, at some point we will need to
Yes, I agree.
advertise to
Yep.
bring someone
Yep,
in.
I
Not
agree.
necessarily straight away, but I just
I
want to make
agree.
sure that
Yep.
that she didn't come off of, maybe someone on the review committee will want to
Yep.
do this on a
Yep, I
permanent
agree with
basis,
everything you
but-
said. Yep,
Okay,
that
so
makes
I just
sense.
wanted to make sure of those two things, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so next we have, gotta find where I am. Select board comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the select board and are the opinions and comments only of the individual member. Select board member O'Laughlin.
So this is a little bit of a different comment for me. It's really just something that piqued my interest. Courtney and I did a lot of work during the last year on the 150th, and I've really gotten into the history of the town. There was something very interesting that happened just this past week at the GAR Hall. They did a paranormal investigation. The guys from Ghost Hunters were there. It was the stuff that they found. I'm not a big paranormal guy, but I would not go there at night. Like, there's a lot of, there was walking around upstairs, like they're standing there and everything's quiet, but you hear footsteps upstairs. At one point they showed, zoomed in on camera at 350 resolutions, and you actually physically saw something coming towards the camera. I mean, it could have been dust or something. They tried to explain it away, but it's about an hour long, and they did overnight investigation, and it was actually fascinating. And the hall looked great, and it was great because they showed some shots of the town from a drone above and stuff, and it was really fascinating. They talked a lot about the history of Rockland and Hartsuff Hall and all the work that Matt Warner from Warner Paranormal is doing over there and stuff. And if you get a chance, check it out. I'll share the YouTube link. But also, they do tours through there all the time, and I think he's suggested if anybody wants to stay overnight there, they're welcome to. But it was really, really creepy, some of the stuff that they were finding on this. So it was a little different. So that's all I got.
All right, Select Board Member Ellard.
All right, on the election front, as of 6:30 tonight, when I checked into the clerk's office, of the 17 positions, we've had at least 16 people pull papers for those positions, and we will have at least one contested election. We have 4 people who at least pulled papers for the select board, and as a kind of a political junkie, that's kind of exciting that we're actually going to have an election in Rockland this year. I'm hoping there's still time. You still have a couple of weeks if you want to pull papers for any of the open positions. I certainly encourage you to do so. Let's actually, Rockland elections used to be, an event as opposed to an afterthought, so I'm kind of hopeful that I'm thankful that we're actually going to have something come April, but I'd love to see it get the card get bigger, so to speak, but that's it.
All right, Vice Chair Child.
Yeah, it is very exciting that there's 4 people running for select board, and just to let you know, John, I've turned my papers in already.
Excellent. That's
So, June 14th is Rockland Day, yay. And I also wanted to say, please be mindful when you're driving in Rockland, approaching the crosswalks, because I've had a few more people this week say they almost got hit by a car. So please look out, especially the solar-powered flashing crosswalks. If you see them flashing, just please slow down. So that's it.
All right, this Sunday, starting at 11 o'clock at the Channing Unitarian Church, is their renowned chocolate auction. If you are available, if you like chocolate, it is a wonderful event. Channing members work very hard to put that together, and it's a really fun time. So I told them that I would share the event with all of you. And with that, may I have a motion to enter into executive session, not to reconvene?
Motion.
Yep.
Do you need to read the
Yeah.
why we're going in?
Yep.
Do you want me to read it?
Actually, why don't I?
You might. You?
I'll do it again. May I have a motion to enter into executive session, not to reconvene, executive session minutes and union negotiations per MGL, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, review and approval of executive session minutes of January 16th, 2024, and September 3rd, 2024, per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, all bargaining units, clerical, highway, park, tree, police officers, police superior officers, and firefighters.
Not to reconvene.
Not to reconvene.
Not to reconvene. Right.
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right. Good night, everyone.